Greetings shippers, welcome back. It's time for the monthly Patreon video. That being the video that you guys help me determine over on Patreon every month. If you want to help determine content, head on over, link down below. We also do surprise votes sometimes, and it's always interesting to see what wins. I was pleasantly surprised to be able to return to the realm of comics, this time with a smallish ship, but one with a rich history. It's SpideyTorch, the pairing of Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, and the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm. While Spider-Man is an extremely popular and in some people's opinion overly adapted character, when it comes to the shipping world, he tends to be more associated with either his canon ships or the ever-popular fan pairing of Spideypool, a ship that we talked about quite a while back. However, there are many ships out there for the web-slinger, and his relationship with Johnny Storm has provided shippers with ample material for decades. Despite the sporadicness of current team-ups, there was a time when Spider-Man and the Human Torch were near inseparable in the comic world, drawn together by the marketing and narrative potential of the fact that they were both teen heroes, a novelty at the time, as in the 60s most teenage characters were relegated to the realm of sidekicks. But before we get into how they came to be joined together, let's meet the players individually. Starting with Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, a founding member of the Fantastic Four, also known as Marvel's first family. A quick heads up, we'll be keeping our analysis primarily to the main Marvel universe, that being Earth 616. Moving on. Johnny Storm was not the first Human Torch, that honor going to Jim Hammond, who was created by Marvel in 1939. However, Johnny is definitely the more well-known Human Torch. Gaining his powers from the same bombardment of cosmic rays that changed his whole family, the teenage Storm is transformed into a being who can engulf his entire body in flames. However, unlike most superheroes of the time, this change does not alter his base personality drastically or for the better. On the contrary, Johnny Storm is brash, cocky, a would-be lady killer, and oftentimes a glory hound. He is a teenager in mannerisms as well as age, and has matured over time, but is still prone to fits of poor judgment and not fully thinking things through. Despite all of this, he has a good heart and genuine desire to help others, and is a good friend and aware that he has flaws and works towards bettering himself and becoming more mature and responsible. Johnny is capable of growth and great depth of feeling, particularly when it comes to love, and has been known to slip into bouts of self-pity as well as broad acts of charity, and is in many ways much more complex than people would assume at first glance. While some find him unrelatable, at his core there is a lot to identify with, which is part of the staple Marvel became known for when the company surged into prominence for its superheroes in the 1960s. That being that their heroes were more human in how they would interact, and the flaws they had were more on display and less like positives disguised as flaws. This made their comics unique at the time and created a not oft-seen dynamic between heroes and villains. Some argue that is still the case, but that is highly debatable as comics have evolved towards more introspective storytelling across the board, an introspection that has long been at the core of Spider-Man. Peter Parker, the nerdy outcast high school student bitten by a radioactive spider and granted extraordinary powers. Initially, he used them for personal gain. However, after his cavalier attitude indirectly leads to the death of his uncle, he vows to live by the creed, "With great power comes great responsibility." Peter is smart and dedicated to what he views as his responsibility to help others, to the point where he has a pretty intense guilt complex, fueled by the fact that his loved ones consistently get hurt or die around him. He is a hard worker with a tendency to push his feelings down and express them as Spider-Man, where he is much more of a smart aleck, a trait he shares with Storm. Peter also tends to get very caught up in situations to the point where he loses all objectivity, and as a result of this, he can often be easily manipulated. At his core, he longs for contentment and a more relaxed life. He is quick to make friends and easy to work with, even if some find him annoying, another trait he shares with Storm. And for all of his flaws, he is still somehow a veritable chick magnet. So at their core, these characters have some similarities and some huge differences. At the time when Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were in their infancy, they enjoyed high levels of popularity, almost on the same level. It is hard for modern or new comic readers to conceive of the phenomenon that was the Fantastic Four in this era, especially since at the time of this recording, while known, they are relatively obscure, maintained by true diehards and as a historic staple. However, there was a time when these two were comparable juggernauts, and the decision to cross over was a no-brainer. In fact, the Fantastic Four surpassed Spider-Man for a time and was used as a draw into the Amazing Spider-Man #1 in 1963, wherein they appear on the cover and he tries to team up with them in the issue. But as is alas always the tale of Spider-Man, they assume the worst and attack, and he is forced to leave in a huff, although at the issue's conclusion, Johnny doesn't believe they have to worry about him. Peter Parker is next inspired by Johnny Storm in the Amazing Spider-Man #3, wherein he is motivated by his speech about never giving up. The two circle around each other until Strange Tales Annual #2, also published in 1963, wherein the two team up. As mentioned not only earlier in this video, but in the comic itself, this team-up was largely perpetuated because of the fact that they were teenagers, Spider-Man thinking he will find sympathy and support from a fellow teen. However, the SpideyTorch friendship was unique at the time for not getting off to a smooth start, with a foundation of annoyance that lasted for years and is still a part of their much more positive friendship. Marvel actually allowed these two's negative character traits and their various stresses to create a more realistic encounter. In the issue, Johnny is jealous of all the press Spider-Man is getting, as he feels it should go to him, while Spider-Man finds Johnny to be a glory hound, less concerned with saving people than boosting his own brand and image, as well as a hothead who refuses to listen. While the two eventually come together, the pattern of trying to one-up each other and prove the other has an easier go of it, accompanied by fighting and name-calling, would be a trait that stayed with these two for some time. The Human Torch and Spider-Man pairing proved so popular that for a time the Human Torch was guest starring in The Amazing Spider-Man almost every 4th issue, and Spider-Man was a frequent guest over in the Fantastic Four series as well. However, over time, as Spider-Man's popularity rose and theirs waned, the team-ups became less and less frequent, and the friendship, while it had become a staple, became something relegated to the background, only emerging rarely in certain arcs, though always to great effect and enthusiasm for the fans who remember it. So why ship these two? Well, first we need to examine more of their history and the evolution of their relationship together, as it is complicated. Peter Parker and Johnny Storm come from two very different walks of life, with two very different backgrounds, with experiences that were bound to and did make them clash. Both teens' differences resulted in different approaches to their being heroes. Peter takes being a hero extremely seriously and will sabotage his own personal life and bear all the slings and arrows that come with his lot to do what is right, as well as keep people safe. While Johnny views being a hero as important, he also enjoys the glory that comes with it, and with his more well-off history, expects some kind of acknowledgement for his actions. These expectations played out by having the two frequently become jealous of one another, particularly over the perceived advantages the other possessed. For example, how well received the Human Torch was versus Spider-Man, or how much more Johnny Storm's nephew comes to like Spider-Man. The two were both sarcastic and both pranksters, and could occasionally bring out the worst in each other. Spider-Man definitely became less mature and more spiteful around Johnny Storm in the early days, and Storm's lack of knowledge of Peter's secret identity led to some amusing incidents of him being jealous of Peter and Spider-Man separately. However, the two could also bring out the best in each other, often rising to meet challenges and finding ways to better the other. The two became quick to seek each other out, both for help on a professional level and for emotional understanding. And their pranks could oftentimes be lighthearted and amusing. Slowly, the two came to a mutual understanding about each other and their circumstances, so the jealousy slowly cooled, even if it still reared its head occasionally. The two went from rivals to best friends to family, forming an unshakable closeness, unquestioned by all around them. The two shared many moments over the years, such as building the oft-mocked and sometimes missed Spideymobile. The two have standing dates for movies and the like, which they can break with no hard feelings, unlike with most people. As well, the two have a standardized meeting place atop the Statue of Liberty. And let's not forget the time they had to go and get Johnny's sex tape. In short, the two have proven that they can be there for one another in ways that others simply can't. The takeaway from these two is the idea of friends coming to understand one another even if they will never fully see eye to eye and still have bouts of pettiness, and both could show the other an appreciation for something the other lacked. Johnny incorporated Spider-Man into his family to the point where Peter took his place on the team when Johnny died, and Peter showed Johnny how to be humble and mostly upbeat in the face of extreme adversity, even if he wasn't always humble when Johnny had his own troubles. These two's friendship became so cemented that it has become a staple many writers often return to. For the shipper, these two have much to offer. A playful relationship full of pranks and verbal sparring that is underlaid with a mutual respect built on years of getting to know each other. There is potential for these two as rebellious youths and as maturing adults, though these two are often doomed to character reset, as most comics have issues when it comes to characters progressing for fear that too many permanent changes will halt readership and alienate the core demographic, which is a mindset that may hold some weight or may ignore a changing, aging, yet still loyal fan base, or portray writing bias, which was definitely the case for Married Peter, but I digress. There is also some fun to be had for those who like playing with what is often known as identity porn, wherein characters are dating or interacting without one or both knowing the other's secret identity. An instance that often in canon led to Johnny looking rather foolish, even if some of it was retconned in. As for why not to ship these two, well, it can be hard to find instances of their interaction to get one started. There are so few modern large arcs featuring these two, although it it could be argued that while their arcs are spaced out, they are actually more frequent in number than the more popular team-ups between Spider-Man and Deadpool. And these SpideyTorch moments do still occur, however they also happen to be spread across multiple comics, so it can be difficult to track them down sometimes. However, in the early 2000s and 2010s, there have been some moments for newer readers, such as Dan Slott's 2005 miniseries, the arc during Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run where the two live together, as well as Spider-Man taking his place on the team, is also a good one, although that arc proves that the two probably shouldn't live together. And of course, classic comics are now more accessible than ever. For some, it is not the lack of exposure, but a lack of compatibility. The two do tend to regress to the level of school children when around each other, playing pranks and fooling around, which some find endearing and others finds grounds for nixing the ship. Others dislike one or both of the characters, put off by Johnny's arrogance or tired of Spider-Man's moaning. The two also don't have the greatest self-esteem, and while some feel they could give each other confidence, others feel they would bring the other down. And both of these situations have happened. And then there are some who are fans of other pairings, mostly Spider-Man related, often Spideypool. Still, this relationship, whether one ships it or not, is worth exploring and is a unique cornerstone of the Marvel experience. Two unlikely friends who prove that you don't have to come from the same place or approach things the same way or even have the same outlook to form a close, functional, and rewarding bond. The evolution of these two is something to behold, and there are many cute and iconic moments between the two to get fans of these characters excited. While the ship may be small, it had quite the history and much in the way of fodder. How do you guys feel about this ship? Are you ready to give SpideyTorch a chance, or is there some other Marvel pairing that catches your fancy? Let me know down below. Also, which of the lawn mowing sounds do you like best? Let me know down below. For me, definitely the leaf blower guy right outside. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. In the dead of night, at the scene of a crime. I'm Spider-Man. Look out, he's a menace. This has been Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter to stay up to date or just hang out. Also, special thanks to all my patrons for helping make this possible, names on the side, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.